Welcome to the Capital Light Assembly podcast brought to you by Edison Manufacturing and Engineering. Edison is your contract manufacturing partner focused on capital light assembly of complex mobility and energy products. Joined today by special guest Burak Cendek. Burak, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on your podcast. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I think you have some really interesting perspective and insights, and the work you're doing I think ties nicely to kind of the overall mission here, which is exploring this question of how can companies with a physical product navigate and build things, go from from prototype into low volume production, but then also how can we serve the greater high volume automation manufacturing world. And I think we'll talk around several of these topics. So would you mind, before we dive too deep though, kind of introducing yourself and giving a bit of background on Autotech Ventures?
Sure. I'm a partner at Autotech Ventures. Autotech Ventures is a venture capital firm based out of Menlo Park in Silicon Valley. We have more than $500 million under management. We actually just announced our third new fund, $235 million. So we have plenty of capital, fresh capital to deploy. So if any founders, startups are listening to this, get in touch. We invest in early stage startups in ground transportation. So we are a sector specialist. So we only make investments in ground transportation related companies. And that includes supply chain, manufacturing, logistics, as well as some other things that you may think fall under ground transportation, such as auto retail, repair, insurance, micromobility, shared mobility, EV, AV, all that fun stuff. And as a sector-specific fund, many of our LPs are top global ground transportation corporations, so OEMs, Tier 1s, Tier 2s, as well as large fleets and logistics companies, trucking companies. And we work very closely with them and startups to build relationships, commercial relationships between them. We have dedicated resources to do that. I joined the fund 3.5 years ago. Before that, I was at a more generalist VC, investing in B2B SaaS businesses mostly. And before that, I had my own startup accelerator that I started with my partner in Chicago, helping foreign startups enter the US market. Before that, I got my MBA from University of Chicago. I was a management consultant for many years. And before all of that, I was an electrical engineer. And I'm originally from Turkey and came to the United States back in 2000 to study electrical engineering at Caltech.
Very cool. Yeah, I appreciate that background. And I think maybe the first place we start here is supply chain and logistics. So the idea of materials movement, both kind of raw material coming to manufacturing sites and then also the transportation of finished goods afterwards. I think this is a really interesting space and there's some cool work being done. Can you speak from a supply chain logistics perspective? Where are you seeing some of the greatest innovations and what are certain things that you might be excited about right now?
Absolutely. So I lead our logistics investments at Autotech, and we have a couple of big main thesis. So we are very thesis driven as much as possible, and that is very suitable to our sector focus approach. Like we get to see a lot of similar companies and then slowly see patterns on like what is working, what is not working, and what are the pain points. And then we also get a lot of feedback from our LPs in terms of like what are they experiencing in the real world. So based on all of that information, we form a thesis and then look for the best investment with that fits into that thesis. When it comes to logistics and supply chain, so it's a very fragmented industry. So when you look at logistics, when you look at trucking, even the largest player doesn't have more than like 3-4% market share. It's a very fragmented industry in terms of stakeholders. And in terms of technology platforms, it's also very fragmented. There are like tens of TMSs, transportation management systems, tens of WMSs, warehouse management systems. So, and then on top of that, a lot of the industry is still not digitized. So it's a little bit, still analog. A lot of like phone calls happening. At best, emails are happening still. So a lot of communication is happening old school. Based on that, one of our big themes is solutions that target this fragmentation and kind of like building either the digitization of the information and also building the kind of like the pipes and rails connecting all these different fragmented stakeholders together. So in our portfolio, we have an investment called Neutral, for example, that connects to the TMSs of shippers and brokers and aggregates their freight, their load information, extracts it, aggregates it, and then serves to third-party technology providers or carriers. So enabling digital bookings and enabling the kind of solving the fragmentation. Think of it as like kayak for freight. So that's one thing that like we believe has a bright future. Another one is ClearNow, for example. ClearNow is a customs clearance automation platform and drayage platform, and that whole industry is also still very paper driven. A lot of PDFs, a lot of emails back and forth between the suppliers, manufacturers, freight forwarders. So ClearNow collects all that information, extracts the data from those documents, and provides visibility and then provides automation in terms of customs clearance. And then not only it clears the customs, it also helps you move it from the port to your warehouse via drayage marketplace. And then we saw that they had an amazing time during the last year with all the supply chain issues, all the port problems, that visibility and effectiveness and automation help a lot of companies get materials into their warehouses as fast as possible. So those are like a couple of examples of that are targeting digitization, automation, and fragmentation in the logistics industry.
And how do you think about navigating? I mean, these are kind of maybe archaic's not the right word, but the old school industries,
Yes.
which right they've been working well for some time, but there is a future state. There's a solution that comes up that which on paper theoretically can make a step function improvement. And how do you think about trying to one evaluate if it's the right solution, then also try to help those companies actually make the change? Because I imagine it's the idea makes perfect sense, but then as you dive into it, and all the inertia and everything that sits for how these industries have worked in the past, it's maybe not always the easiest thing to shake up the industry
Yes.
and get to a future state. So how do you think about helping these founders try to actually make the impact they're trying to make?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, none of the investments we make are just like cool visions. So they need to be addressing a real, actual, current pain point that the customers are willing to pay. So it cannot be just like, hey, I am building a plaid for freight. Like it cannot be that. Like it has to be actually solving a real pain point today. And part of that is also, I think, meeting the customers where they are at. So like one area that we are currently exploring is the EDI space. I think, EDI, electronic data interchange, has a long history and it is so-called a standard, but there are different, again, variations, different players, different service providers, and it is here to stay for the foreseeable future. So anything that like I think you are building that is supposedly like going to replace EDI, I think needs to start with EDI. Like you need to provide the EDI connectivity. And then when you get to a certain scale, maybe you can remove EDI and then, you can have more like API or real-time connectivity, whatever platform you are building between your stakeholders. But you need to meet your customer where they are at. In the tracking as well, like if your customer is using WhatsApp, text message, you need to uh, embed those channels mechanisms into your solution. And like there are a lot of technologies there right now, especially with you know document processing, document capture, document processing has been around for many, many years, but with now like OpenAI APIs, it is kind of going in the direction of being a commodity. Like even I can get a bill of lading document PDF, convert it to text, and put it into Chat GPT and ask like, hey, like where is this going from, and where is it going to, what is the invoice number, etc., etc. So I think a lot of that currently will go in the direction of like, okay, you continue doing how you are doing, and we're going to be a layer on top of that intelligent layer, extracting data and generating data with generative AI getting into these solutions as well now. I think that would be the easiest and least path of least resistance. So, like start with meeting where the customer is at, and leverage the channels they are using. And as you are gaining traction and progress and becoming part of their daily workflow, then you can start changing their behavior. But it would be a very uphill battle to like companies don't like, for example, I see this in the TMS. I don't think like the world needs 113th TMS platform. I think the lack of traction or lack of adoption is not because there isn't a good enough TMS. It's more about to your point, like how do you get your users to use these new technologies?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a good jumping off point. So I'd be really interested to get your thoughts on automation. So that means a lot of different things to a lot of people. I mean, automation, right? I mean, on road, we're talking, long haul, middle mile, last mile type stuff, even just in the ground transportation space, but then also warehouse automation. So I was, in the Detroit area recently at Automate show, and it's unbelievable if how many companies are doing interesting things in the automated material movement space and AMRs and AGVs and automated forklifts and other solutions. How are you guys thinking about finding, where is the real value here in the people who are solving real problems?
Yeah, no, really good question. So I think like moving to the actual movement of physical goods and not just the software. So we are highly interested in autonomous systems. We have several investments in our portfolio. We so far stayed away from on-the-road autonomy, whether it's autonomous trucks or robotaxis. We stayed away from those investments because of mainly the uncertainty in the timelines. But we made investments in several investments in off the road autonomy. One of them is Safe AI, autonomous vehicles in the construction and mining industry. Another one is Verdant in agriculture. And then also Fox Robotics, autonomous forklifts. All of these operate in more controlled environment, and all of these have very direct B2B ROI to their customers. Whether it's reducing work, increasing throughput, reducing cycle times, etc. So one thing there is like, I think the important thing is again, like what are you solving for? What pain point are you addressing? If you are just like targeting to eliminate low cost labor, that's not really exciting for us. Like that's I we don't think that's a sustainable value add in the long term. On top of that, I think you should be increasing productivity, or you should be reducing the cycle time, or you should be able to do something that the humans cannot do. Just reduce, I think, addressing reducing manual work at low cost is not very exciting. And then the second piece is the defensibility, the moat. Like, is this something okay? Like a lot of companies can build, or what is your IP? Can you defend it and build a moat around that? And then lastly, also like your distribution channel and your partnerships and the network effect that you might potentially be creating. Is this just a point solution, or are you creating network effects by building a network of these systems?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a useful framework, and I think it's helpful. I don't know, looking at the macro environment and like especially the VC and funding space, but it seems like these types of questions that you're asking right now, and kind of the prudence that's going into making intentional and strategic decisions that maybe the rest of the industry wasn't as money was flowing pretty easily until about a year and a half
Yes.
ago. It seemed like for certain things, but that's not the macro environment that we're in right now. How, for the founders that you're working with, or anyone who has a startup, how should they be thinking about
Sure.
trying to navigate the environment that we're in now?
Yep. Yeah, so the way that we view the world is like the startups, we put them in three buckets, the top performers, middle group, and the bottom performers. Top performers, I think, there's still plenty of money. There's still plenty of rounds happening. And so if you are a top performer, if you have an amazing founding team addressing a huge market with a strong product, you're going to get funded. It may take longer than anticipated. So right now, everyone is taking their sweet time and doing deeper due diligence. Bar is higher, so things take longer, and then the valuations are lower at the earlier stages. Seed stage still not as impacted, but Series A definitely impacted. Series B, both the volume of deals and the valuation have been impacted. So if you're in that bucket, you're going to get funded, but you need to plan for longer duration, fundraising duration, and you need to adjust your expectations. If you're at the bottom, unfortunately, a lot of companies are going to go out of business. So maybe you should look for acquisition, M&A options out there. And then the middle one is, I think, the most challenging one because it's all about survival. So the middle group, if they can survive through these challenging times, they might come out at the other end stronger than ever, because many of your competitors are going to go out of business. So you need to make sure that, you reduce your burn, extend your runway, do opportunistic runs wherever you can find money, get the support of your existing investors, just focus on surviving.
Maybe I don't know how to necessarily answer this, but so I'll ask you the question. But how can a founding team objectively figure out which one of those three they are? Right, the top.
I think like it's. I mean, you obviously like you won't know without trying, but like if you go to the market for fundraising and it becomes apparent after talking to 20, 30, 40 funds whether there is demand for your company in the market or not, and also your commercial performance. If the business is doing really really well, then of course like you should not throw the towel and you should fight and make sure that you're either in the top group or the middle group. But it's kind of free market. I think what I've seen is like for a lot of the companies, unless like again like unless you are commercially not successful, there is a clearance price, so to say. Like a lot of companies, I think, in the beginning of this downturn, didn't adjust their valuation expectations and spend a lot of time fundraising at higher expectations. But then they realized that
Hmm.
that's not going to work, and then they reduced their expectations, and then voila, like they were able to fundraise. So I believe if you are again if you go to the market and talk to investors quickly, you will see how receptive the market is for your company.
And I'd appreciate your thought, but it seems like there still is a lot of potential in this, especially supply chain, logistics, manufacturing
Of
world. So,
course.
I mean, Edison is addressing a small niche, right? So we're low volume, capital light, niche manufacturing. We're seeing or assembly, and we're seeing a ton of interest. But the type of companies you mentioned, I mean, the manufacturing world, onshore manufacturing, supply chain,
Oh yeah.
movement of materials, and like, it seems like there's a tremendous ability for there to be a bunch of winners in this industry.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about like supply chain risk management, supply chain visibility, procurement. Like a lot of there's a lot of shift is happening in terms of the supplier base of the manufacturers. Everyone is trying to diversify their supplier base, find new suppliers. Anecdotally, there is a lot of chatter about nearshoring, so a lot of changes are coming and or already happening. And that makes supply chain management, supply chain risk management, supply chain visibility, procurement, finding new suppliers, negotiations, RFP processes, all of that are becoming very, very important in today's environment.
Yeah, cool. And I know we were just able to scratch the surface on a few of these topics here, but really appreciate the time, Rock. Lot of fun here. I think we covered some good topics. Maybe the last question. So if someone is in the situation where they're looking for for funding, what's the best way for them to reach out and see if Autotech might be a good fit there?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can add me on LinkedIn, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I actually like have public office hours, and the link for that, there's a calendar link on my LinkedIn profile. Anybody can sign up. It's my way kind of to give back to the ecosystem. So anybody can sign up to those office hours, come ask questions. They don't even need to be fundraising and pitch. Like if they have questions about the business they're building or they're thinking about building, I'll be happy to talk with them. Otherwise, they can also reach out to us at founders at autotechvc.com.
Awesome. That's a good place to leave it. Well, Rock, thanks again. A lot of fun here. Really appreciate you joining, and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again. Great conversation. Thanks for your questions. And yeah, looking forward to it. Bye bye.
Thanks.